A meeting of the Transportation Policy Committee is called to order. A quorum is present. For those participating via Zoom, please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. The chat function is disabled since the public cannot see chat communications. Additionally, for those in the room today, please be aware that your microphone may pick up sidebar conversations. These conversations might not be heard in the room, but they may be broadcast. Welcome to our newest committee member, Scottsdale Council Member Tom Durham.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. The next item is a call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. We have not received any comments for today's meetings, so we will move to item 3, which is the approval of the May 16th meeting minutes. Could I have a motion to approve the May 16th, 2021 TPC minutes?
Madam Chair, Ken Weiss, I'll make the motion.
A motion from Mayor Wires and a second from Mayor Osborne. And we will turn to Melissa. So I think we're doing hybrid roll call. We will do everyone in person. We can vote by your hand. Yep. So for those present, please raise your hand if you vote in affirmation. Please now lower your hand and raise your hand if you are against. Everyone here is in favor, and we'll turn to Melissa for roll call for Zoom participants.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TPC, I'll call the Zoom participants. Councilmember Binsbacher. Doug DeCluson.
Here.
Here.
Hi, this is a vote. Hi, we're going to vote on the minute.
You're here, but
please indicate how you vote.
Oh,
Councilmember Binsbacher.
Aye.
Thank you.
Doug DeCluson votes aye. Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall. Hi, Mayor Hall, we can't hear you. Mayor Hartkey.
Yes.
Thank you. Charles Humantle.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Price.
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed?
Thank you. We have approved the meeting minutes. We will move to item 4, which is an update on the development of the new regional transportation plan. And
thank you, Chairwoman Gallego, members of TPC. Good to see you in person and virtually today to give you an update on the latest activities associated with the development of the next regional transportation plan to inform the extension of Proposition 400. We were asked to first start today with a bit of a visualization to emphasize and illustrate the value these large regional investments have and continue to bring to our region since 1985. And so what we've done is utilizing a select link analysis from our modeling team, put together a bit of an animation and illustration of the far-reaching benefits of projects that may be outside of the actual location for which they are delivered. We have selected what we consider a fairly non-controversial project, the I-10 from the Duck Park Tunnel to Split, to do this illustration for you today. So David, if you want to scroll down a little bit. So what this map illustrates is the origination of trips that go through this particular project. So again, we're talking about the I-10 from the Duck Park.
Did anyone else just lose sound?
Yes, I
did as
definitely
well.
can't hear anything.
Yep.
I lost sound.
Madam Chair, we're unable to hear on the Zoom call.
For some reason, we can hear each other on the Zoom call, but we can't hear anything from the room and the presentation.
We're not able to chat, so how do we do this?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
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 All right, we're back on live. Apologies for the technical. So as I was saying, for the benefit of those who are joining virtually, I'll step back just a few steps. David, you don't need to change the location of this map. But we were asked by Mayor Gallego to illustrate some of the technical work that has ultimately informed the development of these scenarios, and to further emphasize how since 1985, the regional projects for which have been built and are continuing to be projected into the future serve such important regional benefit. We selected the I-10 project between the Deck Park Tunnel and Split to help illustrate the far-reaching benefits of this kind of an investment. You'll see here we are illustrating now the destination. I'd previously shown a map where trips originate. The darker colors illustrating where a higher number of trips start. Here we're showing the destination location. So in folks traveling through this particular project, where are they heading to? We've isolated in a call out here some of our major activity centers and employment areas, and you see there's a high correlation to them. And if you continue downward, David, into this map, we'll get to an animation, again, using the select link analysis. What you're seeing is over a 24-hour period, where trips start and where they head to. Again, we're only isolating this particular project location, and you can see how far-reaching both these trips or the origin of these trips are to where they are destined to. The darker color dot indicates the origin. The lighter color blue is the destination or heading out of the project area, and each dot represents 20 trips. And so you can see now at the end of the day, we're starting in the wee hours of the morning again. If you want to zoom one out, David, there we go. You can see even further stretches of where these trips are originating and where they're destined to. Again, this is a select link analysis, so we've only highlighted and isolated this particular project location, but you can see just even across our two counties and beyond how important these regional investments are. We will share this link with you. We also have a static handout to provide you, but thought we'd start our meeting off with that kind of an illustration. David, I think we can move on to the PowerPoint presentation now. So we've been busy over the course of the last few days, having taken your direction at the May Transportation Policy Committee to start with the system optimization half-cent scenario, receive and solicit priorities for member agencies that perhaps were left out of that scenario, and with your direction to develop a revised scenario with the options to potentially go over a half cent if we had to and illustrate what that rate might be, but also the opportunity to even consider a different term length of the sales tax, notably perhaps out to 25 years. So next slide. So we've done that. With your partnership, member agencies partnership, who worked really quickly to turn around letters to submit to MAG last Friday, we've consumed that information and ultimately created for your review and presentation today 2 new revised scenarios based on the letters submitted by member agencies. Those 2 scenarios are a 6/10 of a cent at 20 years and a half cent at a 25-year term. Our focus now is turning to you to help provide direction on where we go from here ultimately selecting one of these to move from and onto, and then identifying the key assumptions for which we want to further affirm or discuss before we start developing that final plan with the composition of consensus projects and programs. Next slide. Today's focus, we will start with a few things. You had a big agenda packet we distributed yesterday. We'll give you a brief update from the Management Committee Work Group and its last meeting at the end of May, where we presented kind of the final technical piece, which is the bus operating assistance concept. We'll give you an update on what we've been hearing from the public. At the same time, you and your staff have been reviewing these scenarios. We've been out asking the public, stakeholders, and other organizations, anyone who will give us a few minutes of time to provide us their feedback and thoughts. We'll share some of those high-level observations with you. We'll present then and spend probably the majority of our time on the two new scenarios for which we have pulled together, and then talk about some of those underlying assumptions. Next slide. So let's first start with the bus operating assistance guiding principles. Next slide. More information was included, of course, in your agenda packet today. We reviewed this in detail with your managers at the Management Committee Work Group, and then we'll also present through committee. Your staff has also received this information. Bottom line, our assumption coming out of Proposition 400, the direction we have heard from you is to at least keep and that baseline transit service coming out of Proposition 400. We consider that the baseline or floor, and that is a fixed allocation to those agencies representing the last year of the Transit Lifecycle Program of the year 2025. Any additional funding above and beyond that amount, for which these scenarios do include some additional funding, would be allocated by a proposed formula, a 50% allotment coming from revenue miles, a 50% coming from annual boardings. Again, the focus here is to incentivize transit decisions that place our scarce regional resources towards the highest levels of transit demand and need throughout the region. You can find more information ultimately in your agenda packet that outlines the specifics associated with this formula, as well as an illustration of how it might look using some more recent transit data, but we won't spend that time today getting into the details. Next slide. Public engagement. As I mentioned, for the last 6 weeks, we've been working, of course, with member agencies and all of you, but also with the public. We've had a variety of opportunities, engagement strategies, and partnerships in order to solicit feedback. Next slide. These are some of just the examples of engagement we've had to date. These are out-of-date numbers. I will assure you these are about 10 days old. These numbers are higher now going into this week. We've really leveraged our website that we have built an interactive tool to be able to not only express these 4 initial scenarios, but to solicit feedback. We've had several questions. We have had 6 different public meetings that we hosted. You'll see a snapshot here of one of those virtual meetings. We were pleased to be able to present simultaneous Spanish translation and American Sign Language at each of those virtual meetings. That went well. I think we're proud that we eliminated barriers to participation for underserved populations in that sense. We also used a live chat feature where folks can talk to our planners throughout the day by just chatting on our website. Really liked that tool for ease of connectivity to the public. And just today, earlier today, as is required by federal statute, we had invited all of our federal partners and other resource agencies, as is outlined in the statute, to connect to, learn more about the scenarios and the planning work to date, receive their feedback. And so that is occurred just a few moments ago virtually, and we'll be presenting that feedback, of course, too, as well. Next slide. Well, I'll give you a few highlights today. Do note that we will be packaging all of this information up to provide to you this month. Just some high-level feedback for your consideration. Continued emphasis from what we're hearing on expanding and improving transit options, as well as active transportation modes, those bicycle and pedestrian investments. Real emphasis from the public to diversify our transportation portfolio. Notably, a lot of interest in and support for active transportation, safety, as well as technology that continues to come up over and over again. The public is expecting, wanting us to look forward, be innovative and creative into the future, as well as flexible to address those things we don't know today. There is considerable support for a diverse multimodal portfolio, cognizant that we need to have deliberate intended freeway investments, but that not to be the reliance as part of this portfolio. Equity, environmental sustainability, and livability issues continue to come up, especially in our public meetings. High level of emphasis on those quality of life aspects looking into the future. And then finally, as we've heard both in our polling as well as our values mapping and other research prior to this, a high degree of support for recognition of the benefits of going over a half-cent sales tax investment. Next slide. So we'll move on to the revised scenarios. Next slide. So a couple key points. We included this in one of the memos for your agenda packet today, but I think it's important to kind of ground us in a couple of these overarching takeaways for this work to date. In developing these revised scenarios, we went to the best of our ability to accommodate the expressed priorities submitted by member agencies over the course of the last few days. We have included all of the letters that were submitted by member agencies as well in your agenda packet. We did have a few updated parametric cost estimates for a few projects. A couple of them we were still waiting on when we released the first set of scenarios. We have now provided those final remaining parametric estimates that we are waiting on from our consultant team. At this point, the estimates that are provided are final. The funding horizon is an important thing to remember. This work right now is focused on a continuation of the sales tax and the federal funding, as well as the Highway User Revenue Fund available to the region starting January 1st of 2026 and going to at least 20 or 25 years beyond that. We have received a lot of questions from member agencies, especially over the last few days, about arterial investments, particularly when they can start, when are they eligible. Keep in mind, as is consistent with Proposition 400 and our commitment to the voters, any arterial project included in this suite of investments cannot start, is not eligible to start before January 1st of 2026 for reimbursement. And to keep in mind that because of cash flow, we can't do everything starting in January 1st of 2026. And so once we are able to reach consensus on the projects specifically for the draft final plan, we will then move into a phasing approach and present a draft phasing schedule of all projects that is reflective of projected cash flow, distribute that for feedback and comment before we actually finalize the plan for conformity. Next slide. I'll orient you to this slide. These are the revised projections based on these two new scenarios. By way of reminder, we were directed to start with the system optimization half-cent scenario. So you'll see that in the left column. So those are fixed and the same as you saw in the materials distributed over the last 6 weeks. What you'll then see is revised projections based on a different rate at 6/10 and a different term at 25 years. Each of these scenarios includes the fixed federal funding allocation as well as HERF projections, so those don't change, as you will see, except for the duration for which we've projected them out. Ultimately, the 6/10 scenario for 20 years delivers a little bit extra revenue at $31.2 billion, adding 5 years to the sales tax adds provides a total of available funding in the amount of $36.7 billion. Next slide. We'll first start with the 6/10 scenario at 20 years. You'll see in the map here, we have indicated all the high capacity projects. Those include 2 light rail extensions, one out I-10 West extension, as well as an extension for West Phoenix in or around perhaps the Camelback area, but to be determined for an LPA. This also includes 1 streetcar extension from Tempe to Mesa and down Dobson to connect to the existing light rail. You'll see 3 bus rapid transit alignments for corridors, I should say, considered as part of this scenario. And then the orange or yellow color illustrates the variety of arterial projects also included. In addition, of course, to the important HOV and several general purpose lane additions, you'll see the full build out of the 24 and then 3 segments of the SR30. In this scenario, we are able to deliver the center segment of SR30 full build, the eastern segment of SR30, so from the 202 to I-17, we've been able to identify environmental and right-of-way preservation in this particular scenario. And for the western segment of SR30, from the 303 out to 85, an interim build facility for this segment of the 30. Next slide. We've gotten a lot of questions about the regional subbalance. You'll see here illustrated on the bottom of this slide, using an average of the population growth over the course of the next 25 years. You'll see the proportional share of East, Central, and West, as well as then the proportion of investments made in those 3 sub-areas as well. As we've indicated all along, the 4 original scenarios, the 2 half-cents, the 2 1-cents, as well as these 2 scenarios for which we're presenting you today, have been and will continue to be regionally balanced. Next slide. So again, looking at the 6/10 scenario, you'll see from a high level of the association of how that funding is apportioned between our major categories, programs, arterials, freeways, and transit. You'll also see some fast facts that we've pulled together on the miles of additional investment, but also not to be overlooked, the important programmatic investments associated. From our perspective, this is one of the keynote features of our scenario planning and really the assumptions going into this work. This provides some flexibility as well as forward thinking, allowing us to respond as necessary to important projects and or technologies into the future. Next slide. Right, I'll orient you to this slide. This is the 25-year scenario at a half-cent. You'll see, again, we have 2 light rail investments included, 3 bus rapid transit investments included, as well as the streetcar extension as mentioned previously. In addition to some significant freeway investments we're able to add to this scenario, that includes now the full build of the eastern and center SR30, as well as the interim facility for western 30. Next slide. Again, you'll see at the bottom of this slide, the regional balance, again, extremely similar to the one just previous and in, from our perspective, a regionally balanced portfolio of investments. Next slide. You'll see the revenue breakdown here against the major components. As a reminder, we have approximately $36 billion of funding available in this scenario. You'll also see the programmatic investments with that added 5 years worth of program funding to accommodate the longer term, as well as some of the quick facts associated with the capital investments. Next slide. So I think I'll stop there, maybe take a breath, Mayor Gallego, and turn it to you and see if there's any questions perhaps just on the scenarios themselves.
Wonderful, thank you. And could we have the members of the committee who are online back in full screen mode? Wonderful. Thank you very much. I assume Bridget's iPhone is Councilwoman Binsbacher, and we'll begin with her.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mag, Audra, thank you for that presentation. I want to say that I really appreciate the presentation so far and that you pulled together these scenarios quickly and to present to us today. I really appreciate that. So with regard to the preferred tax rate and term specifically, I just would like to say that, you know, Peoria's top goal in all of this process and this extension is to achieve regional unity and support of a plan. I think we're stronger together if we're in agreement as far as where we land and the direction we go with this. And I'm not sure that we have political support to actually increase the tax rate, but I just want to be clear that I would definitely be supportive of continuing the 25-year term discussion if we can achieve regional unity in doing so. And again, that's just for Peoria. I just wanted to voice that is a top priority for us. And I really, truly believe for us to be successful, we need to be on the same page and in agreement on the direction that we're moving with this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We'll go to Mayor Woods.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to second Councilwoman Binsbacher's comments about just, you know, wanting to, first of all, thank the staff. I mean, I recognize that you worked day and night over the weekend to really put together these two scenarios very quickly. So I just wanted to say, first and foremost, thank you to MAG staff for putting in the hard work to get these scenarios done so we could really have a really good, thoughtful, robust conversation today. You know, my preference after looking through both proposals is really to go with the half-cent tax over the next 25 years. I really do feel from looking at it, it appears to offer a benefit for communities throughout the entire region and really is effectively integrated a lot of the feedback that MAG's received from cities and towns from their response letters. And so from my perspective, that's the direction that I would like to go in because I really think that's the proposal that has the best chance for success. And I feel like that's the one that does the better job, just from my humble opinion, of taking care of the entire region and providing the service we need.
Thank you, Mayor. Was that Mayor Weiss?
It is. Thank you. I would echo the former two statements. I think this is a good step forward. Looking forward to hearing from my friend Skip and Surprise on this, but I think this is a good step forward. I appreciate Mayor Lord bringing this up. I think 25 years makes sense. I think it clears up some of the concern that the West Valley has without having a full SR 30 build out. I will tell you that from an Avondale perspective, and again, Bridget, I agree with you, Corey, I agree with you, unity for me is important, and I like what I see, but I will tell you that from an Avondale perspective, when I look at the materials that were presented for projects, SR 30 getting built without help on interchanges along Dysart Road is a big deal for me. I don't know how you take traffic onto SR 30 on a major truck thoroughfare like Dysart Road and don't help the community build onto that. And that could be another discussion in the future. But I will tell you, I like the 25 year for half cent. I think the West Valley mayors, you know, are looking at this. I think there's a concern that the full cent wouldn't pass and that any tax increase wouldn't pass the legislature. So Skip, I'm interested to kind of hear what you have to say on this, sir.
And we are going to go next to Mayor Hartke, although if Mayor Hall would like to raise his hand, we would welcome that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, because I'm looking at this as well, and as we've had a brief chance to digest this with our staff, I do think that there are advantages of these two scenarios, assuming these are the two moving forward from what I'm hearing, is that the 25-year probably has a better shot of getting past our legislators, as well as fleshing out some of the projects that are important to more of us. And so of these two scenarios, that would be the one that I would support.
Thank you, Mayor Hartke. We're going to have to give an award to Mayor Lord for coming up with the 25 years. Chairman Sellers.
I think one of the things we're missing here is that shouldn't we be telling the legislature to give Maricopa County the same authority that every other county in the state has, and then let the voters tell us what they're willing to do and how much they're willing to invest? It shouldn't be the call of the people at the Capitol.
Thank you, Chairman. Mayor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been ultra vocal on this for I think every meeting that I've been at, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I greatly appreciate MAG taking another look in the entire organization and every committee that I serve on. And thank you for hearing me out on all the opportunities we've had to speak. We are thrilled and very thankful that we kind of tapped the brakes and took a look at that State Route 30 portion that is in the Buckeye region, and would fully support either one of these, and appreciate the comments by Supervisor Sellers trying to get some of that power back to the people and let the people decide what they want for infrastructure funding moving forward. I had a couple of questions actually a comment that that initial graphic that you put up that showed the traffic to and from the downtown area, I think is very telling of, we're talking about areas out in Buckeye or areas on Queen Creek or North Phoenix, and all of that. I know 90% of our people travel east to get to jobs. So I can see that on that graphic that you put up, and it's very important that we're making sure that people can get to jobs and that ultimate destination in the central region, whatever part of the central region that is. The dots that started, is that just the center of the zip code? Is that?
Yeah, Chairwoman Gallego, Mayor Osborne, that is actually a distinct geography, and it's the center of the localized geography, which is why you see those kind of distinct paths. So it's just to illustrate where the trip starts and where the trip goes through that particular facility and where it ends.
And does it does not necessarily follow a specific freeway or arterial? Is there a graphic that shows that movement within the Metro Phoenix area?
We can, that is possible. It takes a little longer to do that work and the visualization work associated with the short turnaround. This is what we were able to pull off just to demonstrate the origin and destination. But we are able to demonstrate how traffic sometimes flows in some of these facilities, utilizing our activity-based model, particularly using the entire system. It just takes a long time to do.
Okay. And the
just to clarify on the graphic, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just think we might be a little bit confused about what that graphic is, and I'm hearing it. That's why I'm wondering if there's a disconnect. That's specific to one project within the entire system. So that's not necessarily trips, all the trips that are going to and from the downtown. Am I understanding that right?
Chairwoman Gallego, absolutely, Ms. Daniels, what that is representing is where trips that go through that particular project, and that particular project location, again, is the I-10 between the Deck Park Tunnel and the split, so it's here downtown. It's what traffic using that facility or who would use that facility, where they start and where they end. So we're just looking at a particular piece of infrastructure, a very short duration of a few miles, and where the origin and destination of traffic flowing through that particular point actually starts and finishes.
Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, and then the final question I have is regarding the 25-year potential scenario that we're looking at. What does that equate to for a 20-year sales tax number or sense? Do we know?
Mayor Gallego, Mayor Osborne, off the top of my head, it's around 0.7%, maybe a little bit higher, but just doing back of the napkin math. Part of the challenge, as Audra had indicated earlier, when we're looking at a 20-year term, the only additional revenues that you get are associated with the sales tax. So that additional 5 years gets us additional federal revenues and HERF revenues. Condensing it in 20 years is just the sales tax.
Okay.
And just put some numbers on that too. So the sales tax by itself for 5 more years is, I think, $5 billion. But that extra 5 years gets us another $3.5 billion of other revenue to federal funds and HERF funds, presumably. Correct. Clarification.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. We are going to go to Mayor Hall and then Chairman Sellers. And Mayor Hall, I cannot hear you. All right, we are going to go to Chairman Sellers and then Mayor Hall.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, you know, I completely agree that State Route 30 is probably the highest priority project we have in this region. But we can't lose track of the fact that we are the fastest growing county in the United States, and that's not going to be our only priority in the next 20 or 25 years.
All right, shall we try Mayor Hall again? That makes it harder to...
Madam Chair.
Mayor Weiss.
Let me jump in before Skip does on this. And Chairman Sellers, I would wholeheartedly agree with you that SR 30 is the most important project that we can build over the next 20 years. I would disagree respectfully a little bit. I know we have other priorities, but SR 30 is one of those projects that truly benefits the entire region when it comes to transportation. We had a conversation with Senator Mark Kelly when he visited the West Valley last week, or earlier this week, I'm sorry. And one of his first comments to the organization was, you know, I really dreaded driving out here. And it wasn't because he was meeting with West Valley mayors. We know how difficult that can be. But he said the backup on I-10 was what really scared him. And his words were, I wish there was an option. And we presented the SR 30 to him. And his comments to the organization was, I can see where this roadway, where this freeway would benefit the border down in Mexico, trade coming in from California, goods going to Chandler and Tucson and across the rest of the United States. So while we look at SR 30, yes, the freeway will be built in the West Valley exclusively east of Central Avenue. But the truth is its economic impact for the region is a full regional effect. And I think that just has to be taken into consideration. Understand that we do have other priorities, but also understanding the significance of SR 30 to the entire region.
Yeah, and I'm just so you understand, I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying that to sustain our lifestyle with the growth we're going to have, we need to have more projects in the queue.
Understood.
Thank you. We will go to Mayor Wires and then Mayor Peterson.
Okay, that's better. Well, first of all, I guess what I'd like to do is let everybody know I do have several concerns with the 25-year plan. I really truly don't believe that my council is going to support the extra 5 years of no freeway or arterial projects in our city, given that we currently have over $500 million right now on capital arterial needs that support the region. Now, I'm not going to debate or argue the fact of SR State Route 30. I do believe it's necessary, but to put it in perspective, the original talk was a full-blown freeway. Bell Road right now, a corridor in Bell Road in Glendale, handles twice as much traffic as State Route 30 will in 20 years. And that's a real need that we have right now. And I'm getting calls from my constituents every day about this small piece of construction we're doing, blocking the southbound side of Bell Road in a small area. People are angry. They're angry when you don't fix it, and then they're even more angry when you do fix it. So we're trying to deal with that. I do agree that State Route 30 is something that needs to be looked at and done. I do believe also that my council, I know myself for sure, we would, I'm sure we would be in support of extending the term from 20 to 25 years, but only as long as Glendale receives our share, and I'm not going to use the word fair share, our share of the additional revenues generated from the taxes needed to address our regional traffic demands. We're all growing, we're getting more and more and more. My concern that I haven't heard anybody talk about, the additional 5 years, just a standard growth, you figure a 3% inflation factor, that 5 years, that's an additional 15% higher cost.
and I don't know if Meg looked at that or not, but as we get more and more people using the roads and the costs keep going up, you can't even compare to this last couple of years where that 3% has just been blown out the window. We've got construction costs increasing 20, 30, 40%. So I don't like the idea of a 25. I think we're locking ourselves into something that we may all wish in 15 years that we didn't do. I wish there was a way that we could have some sort of inflator in there that could give us that bump if we needed. I do understand also the challenges that we would have with the legislature providing for that. But somebody made the statement earlier, I don't know who did it. It's something I said a long time ago. I still stand by it. I think we should be pushing hard to get the legislature to at least give us the same opportunity as every other county in Arizona has, and that's the full percent instead of the half. So with that said, I don't want to create problems with my neighbors. It is regional, but at the same time, we do have the largest population in the West Valley. Our needs aren't going away; they're only getting more and more. And if we can't be guaranteed that we're going to get our share, then we won't be able to support. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mayor Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with so much that's been said here today. I understand the frustrations in the West Valley and their need for SR 30 and everything that Mayor Wires just said about Glendale. We know that we've all been growing exponentially over the past decade, and the West Valley, I assume, is going to grow even faster than the East Valley in the next probably 20 years. So this is definitely going to impact them very heavily. I feel that I can support the 25-year extension as we're staying at the half cent. I was concerned that our legislators would not approve a 3/4 or full cent moving forward. This gives us that extra 5 years. And then just hearing the discussion there in the room about the extra funds that would come in those extra 5 years, during those extra 5 years, that makes even more sense as to why we can move forward with this. I also agree with Supervisor Sellers about the fact that we definitely need to be going to our legislators. And if this is the time to start that, then we need to start that now, but we need to be carrying this ball forward at the same exact time as we're working on that process. I would assume that this will move forward, this vote will go through, and we will still be working on that process with our legislators. But that's a whole different discussion that we'll have to have separate from the Prop 400 discussion, I believe. So I will support the 25-year at the half cent moving forward, and thank everybody for the great work that they've done and the opportunity for us to submit more potential jobs here in Gilbert, options here in Gilbert. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chairman Gallego, can you hear me? This is Mayor Hall.
Mayor Hall, we can hear you.
All right. Wow. I'll tell you what, technical challenges. I'm in support of the half cent 25-year scenario, and I'm also very supportive of Supervisor Sellers' comment about we should get this thing fixed with Maricopa County having to go to the legislature to get approved. It's a real hurdle we don't need, and I think we need to work with our legislators to get this thing figured out. So I support you, Supervisor Sellers, and hopefully we can get going on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I do not see anyone else wishing to comment. Oh, Mayor. Okay. I should have. I will always defer to Mayor Lord. Thank you. I just wanted to contribute a couple things, and I don't wear a city hat anymore, but my heart is still very much with our cities, and I appreciate the efforts that are being made, and especially with MAG staff. I can't imagine if you've had any conversations outside of what this looks like for the past probably 4 or 5 months. I would imagine it's probably taken over your life. So thank you to all of you for your commitment there. I'm going to put on my ADOT hat and tell you all that I am fine with a half a cent. I'm fine with 20 or 25 years. I do think that is our best chance of getting something through the legislature if we want to be efficient that way. I also support the effort to to gain authority to go to the voters without the legislature. I love that approach. I would love to see that occur as well. Again, I don't know the political realities associated with that, but I certainly would support that effort simultaneously to having all of these other plans put into place. It would be remiss if I did not say that I do think we need some sort of companion bill that does modernize our gas tax. And I think if we are going to do a half a cent, that is a very reasonable thing to also go to the legislature with. I don't want to tie them together. I very much think they should stay separate, but I do believe that if we stuck to a half cent in this region, then we would need to be working that modernization of the gas tax at exactly the same time. And I can't imagine the legislature out and out just rejecting that idea, but we've got to figure out politically the best way to get that across the finish line. We cannot keep kicking the can down the road as it relates to the modernization of our gas tax. So that's my contribution today.
Thank you, Mayor Lord. Oh, is it fine to go ahead? All right, first of all, I want to thank MAG staff. You really got to work on this and it was quick scenario. And I appreciate the scenarios that you've given us today. Of course, you know, I'm thrilled to see the portion of 30 and Buckeye be able to get their SR 30 to their home area. I think both these plans are terrific. I'm grateful to all the members of the committee with their opinions today for consideration and thoughtfulness. And I really like it because we're really working together with honor and respect to that end. And I get a little emotional when I go to explain things, and I really appreciate you receiving that and doing something about, and in that expression, you're finding the purpose of it. So thank you very much. And to that end, Goodyear would like to move forward with a half-cent scenario at 25 years. Mayor Barney.
I would prefer to see something a little different. I know it's not going to happen. I'd like to see the 5 or the 6, 10s and the 25 year, because I think the money would be put to good use. But I don't think it's politically going to happen in our time frame. But I would like to also say I think that the programs that are listed in that aren't the only ones that are going to be done, or aren't the only ones that are going to be included. They will change in the 25 years as the need arises. As Queen Creek grows here or Buckeye grows there, the needs are going to change. And as these needs change in Glendale, the needs change. We're going to have to be a good community, and all of these are going to get to be relooked at over this 25 years or 20 years of the program. So a lot of things are set in stone. The 30 is set in stone. But a lot of the arterials aren't. They will be added and changed and done as the need arises and as we see the necessity of them. And so that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. So to try to summarize where we are. Could I interrupt? Because Mayor Lord. There's a little something I didn't say, and I want to be sure I support our neighboring city. I support the concept of not tying our hands to prohibit circulators and microtransit from regional eligibility. We would like to maintain flexibility over the life plan, so I support Peoria's suggestion. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Mr. Barry.
Okay, thank you. Dave Barry with Knight Swift Transportation. We're a little trucking company here in Phoenix. And there's a couple things to think about. One is goods movement. And that's, you know, without the proper roads and fuel tax and everything else, the goods just aren't going to be delivered. You know, it can't happen. And we learned that the hard way during the pandemic at the beginning, where the grocery stores literally did not have food. Truck drivers didn't know what exactly they were supposed to do and where they were going. and it was really very well done under very difficult circumstances. But we have in Arizona, and in the Phoenix area, very large distribution centers. It's become a major hub for Amazon and all these other Walmart and other big companies that are bringing these goods into the city into this region, and and we don't want to run those people away. We want them to run to us, and that'll keep costs down also. The other thing to look at today, and I'm sure you're aware of these trends, but the workforce here in the United States is evaporating. We're probably 10% of all truck drivers are now just gone. And so now we can only haul 90% of what we were hauling, when it was 100%. And it's not just in the trucking industry, it's in the construction trades, it's everywhere that you look. And it puzzles me because I don't know where are those people going and why aren't they, why did they choose to do something else rather than, being in the construction or trucking or, those types of things. So I just encourage you to take those thoughts into consideration. The other is safety. I travel the freeways quite a bit here in Arizona and in the Phoenix area, and just commuting back and forth from work on the freeways. There are just a ton of crashes, and we need to do and that's those are people that are getting hurt or worse on these crashes, and so we need to be looking at as we expand our network, we need to really take a very careful look at safety and exactly how can we use technology to prevent, these types of accidents. So just a few things like that. I think the rest of you have pretty well covered all the other issues, and I thought that it would be good for you to hear from me for just a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. We'll go to Mr. Arnett and then Mayor Harkey.
And I add my congratulations to the staff for putting this together so quickly. That's well done. I have a question about the 25 years, and has there been survey work done on 25 years and the acceptability of the public going to the 25 years versus the 20-year? And has anybody looked at what the public thinks about voting for yes, no, or maybe? And having been through this with Prop 400 and helping raise the money with the business community, some of these voters have very staunch opinions of what could, should not be done. And I'm wondering if we have any sense of the 25-year acceptability.
Chairwoman Gallego, Mr. Arnett, we did, as part of our polling work in February that we released just this year, we did actually ask for receptiveness to the term of a tax in addition to the actual rate as well. What we asked at that time was durations of 20 years, 30 years, or indefinite. And so we used those as the examples at the time. Strong support continues for that 20-year portfolio, but we were actually surprised that without any additional context or information, about 20% of respondents actually were also supportive of a perpetual tax. So while we didn't have a specific 25-year option at that point in time, I think what we can infer is that while there is the strongest amount of support for a 20-year term, there is support for going above that 20-year, just to a lesser degree.
If I might, it seems to me we ought to know deadline sure that the voters would accept 25 years before we get so hung up in accepting 25 years. I believe that there's going to be a sale for the 20-year, and we may have to do this again in another 15, 18 years like we're doing now. But I question whether or not the voters will accept 25 years, because it is a change, it's different, and it's an increase. I just have, if we could have it polled so to the 60, 62, 65% as the 20 year, then, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say in Phoenix, we did go poll extensively about the duration, and we went to our voters for an increase in 2015 going through 2050, and they were comfortable with even longer than 25 years. They did have some concerns about indefinite, although my friends in the East Valley have been able to do one without a sunset. We will go to Mayor Hartke and then Cheryl Lombard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm liking just the direction overall of the conversation, but I do feel I'd be remiss if I didn't echo Chairman Sellers with the parallel track that was an earlier part of our conversation with this when we're talking about increasing the amount, and regardless of what the ultimate amount is, that we would be remiss of seeing if we can unhinge Maricopa County from the rest of the state in terms of the availability of doing things like this. And secondly, I just jumping behind Mayor Lord and Mayor Carlott, who's obviously not speaking here today, but in terms of the circulars, I think, again, as we each are developing and will see a rise in some more economic and high-end or high-use corridors, but I really echo just the circular type use as well, particularly amongst our economic corridors, and want to weigh in as a positive on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to Commissioner Lombard, followed by Mayor Weiss.
Thank you. I want to echo everyone's comments to staff. This is my first in-person meeting as a member of GPC, but pulling together these scenarios, it is quite impressive. Along those lines, I again echo supporting both. I agree with the need for polling on the 25 years. I think 25 years and the amount of the tax would be something favorable. I'm working in the real estate development industry, and obviously the growth across our entire valley is, and us being the fastest growing county, that's not going to slow down. So this equal balance across all of the valley is very important. That being said, we are very supportive of SR 30. I think that's important, but also these arterials are important in terms of managing growth and moving people and moving jobs and transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Weiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick things, and Eric, this may be and I don't want to dive deep into this today, but I think this might be a discussion for another TPC meeting. Let me grab this real quick. So I'm looking at the RTP assumptions, and I'm looking at some, and I love the way it's worded, where it says no change on certain things. It makes it very easy to read. There are a couple things that I look at that I still think we need clarification on as a body, so we can go to the regional council and make the recommendations. One is the rail transit asset management dollars, and to have a discussion on that and see if it will be included the way it is presented here, if it will be not included in Prop 500, if it'll be a portion of that funding. And then when I look at bus rapid transit and some of the costs that go along with that, I'm not opposed to these things, but I think when I hear Mayor Wires from Glendale talk about the Bell Road corridor, and I hear about Buckeye talking about roads of regional significance, and I know Skip has those same issues in his town as Bridget does in her town, I'm wondering if it doesn't make sense for this body to look at maintenance and operations and see what trading out some of those dollars for some of the needs of the member agencies and funding those more fully. And I think that has to be decided before we bring back any further recommendations to the regional council. When I'm looking at let me get there real quick, sorry. When I'm looking at the American Public Transportation Association, and I'm looking at ridership, whether it's light rail, commuter rail, heavy rail, bus, trolley, everything, there has been a 25% drop in bus ridership nationwide. And I did those numbers pre-COVID, so last quarter of 2019, a 25% drop. On light rail, it's a 15% drop, and that takes into account added miles that are put into the system across the nation. So, well, I think that light rail and buses obviously have a place in this tax. I just want to make sure as we move forward that we understand that with new technologies coming on board, autonomous ridership, Uber, Lyft, whatever those look like over the next decade or 20 years, I want to make sure that we don't tie our hands to technologies that may be obsolete in the future. So I'd love to have a discussion, and again, not today, but a discussion on maintenance and operations, on bus and on rail, and see what trading out some of those dollars looks like for areas of concern for member agencies.
Thank you, Mayor Weiss. Thank you, Commissioner Daniels. Sorry, just one last question. I still have some pretty serious concerns about the polling that we've done thus far, because I do think whatever we're asking the voters, we need to be able to replicate at multiple periods between now and when we do go to the voters. So to Rock's point, I do think we need to probably dial in that poll that we've done. And I would still love the opportunity to see the crosstabs on that, as I know many other jurisdictions would. I know that we haven't had access to that, but I do think it's pertinent information that we should all have access to with any polling moving forward. We should plan on that being part of our ongoing dialogue, because there are quite a few probably suppositions that are being made based on some of the data, but without the crosstabs, we can't examine that further. So that would be my request moving forward with polling. Charles.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. First, I would like to say I really appreciate you taking leadership of this committee and getting us to a place where I think we all agree. I was worried that we would be much further apart not so long ago. MAG staff has been great. Your leadership has been important as well. I'd also like to weigh in on Supervisor Seller's comments. I think that changing the way that we fund transportation and allocate that is a long-term leadership theory that's really important. We really have to think about how, as many people have mentioned today, we're the fastest growing county in the country, but infrastructure is going to be really important on that. And I think part of that is taking leadership in being able to make our own decisions. I think it's really relevant. The city of Phoenix voters took a pretty big step in taking a long-term tax, and it makes me feel comfortable that others in the county will as well. But I also, and respectfully, hear the concern about rail. But I do think as we continue to try to bring other employers in from other places, that I think rail and moving people in large numbers is really going to be important. And I think we saw in Phoenix that was something that voters thought was really important as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnett.
Madam Chair and Eric, I'm wondering what contingencies has been put into your plan. As I recall, in 2004, we had $1 billion contingency, and that came into play when the economy went south. And wondering what, I can't help but think in 20 years we're going to have some slowdown, and wondering what contingencies have been built into these numbers.
You're right. We did, Madam Chairman, Mr. Arnett, members of TPC, we did include, I think it was more like 500 million, and with the Great Recession, it went away really quickly. So once again, we had a 40% loss in revenue, and so it didn't even come close to meeting that objective. So, I think that John, I'm going to ask John Bullen to address this specifically, who actually put together these scenarios.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Arnett. So within each program, so there's a couple different elements I want to talk about. We do maintain a healthy fund balance. It varies by program, but it's between 5 and 10%. So from that perspective, we do have a really solid contingency. I think another item that we feel really good about this go around is that we put significant resources into costing these projects out. We dialed in far deeper than a normal planning level exercise to make sure that we understood some of the trade-offs. And so, from our perspective, we feel very comfortable that this is a conservative approach. We did go through, identify items that might come up, whether it's freeway capital rehabilitation, some of the rubberized asphalt or diamond grind, that there's money available should these needs arise. So I can say that we feel very comfortable from a conservative perspective about the contingencies we set aside.
Thank you. Councilwoman Binsbacher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want a question for Mag. I just want to clarify, are circulars eligible for funding in any of these extension scenarios?
Chairwoman Gallego, Mayor, the comment or question about circulators as a transit alternative, currently as part of our proposed operating assistance formula, we're able to put a little bit more funding, regional funding, into a transit portfolio. We have not allowed circulators or microtransit to be currently eligible for that funding because it is scarce resources. The overarching principle to ensure continuity of service across the region at a consistent level. Though we're certainly open to continuing that conversation. It's been a hot topic perhaps over the last 12 months or so. But because of the scarcity of resources, some of these are just the trade-offs associated with.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that we really need to reconsider the eligibility for circulators. I think from the very beginning, this whole plan has emphasized, we've been talking about flexibility and adapting to future needs. And that's even, been part of the discussion here today, which this discussion has been great. And again, thank you to Mag for giving us all of this material to review and making it as simple as you possibly can for us to get through it. But I think if we're, in fact, truly focusing on adaptability and future needs, I strongly feel that we need to keep all of our options on the table, particularly the circulators. They can expand the reach of the supergrid at a lower cost than traditional fixed route service. And, we can iron out the details of how we determine specific performance requirements or local match and what that should be. But I think it's critical that we include them in these scenarios. And I would like to request that we include circulators in the revised scenarios and have them eligible to at least compete for funding out of the transit allocation for emerging transit markets in the future. So, and I know some of our other cities have weighed in, and I really appreciate that. This has been an ongoing discussion, but I would look to some of my other colleagues as part of this group, to weigh in on whether we can keep this option, put this option in the new RTP. I think it's very important. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Gallego. Councilwoman Binsbacher, members of the TPC. One of the great things that we're doing this time that we didn't do in Prop 100, we actually put lines on a map in terms of, we thought we were smart enough to understand where the future transit demand was going to be over the next 20 years. And, that was really not a very good way to approach it, quite frankly. So this time, these are programs that we're setting aside funding for in terms of really looking at performance. And so which routes and what kind of routes are being funded, we can actually determine later on, because we haven't actually defined specific routes for this money. So once again, I think these are the conversations that we can have subsequent to this discussion today. And I don't think we have to determine what is and is not, because we haven't developed all the detailed policies that go along with some of these programs yet. So these are still open for discussion in the future too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So to attempt to summarize, which will be imperfect, we as a committee would like the legislature to provide regional parity with the other counties in Maricopa County. We will move forward with a 25-year proposal at a half cent, but not everyone agrees that is the ideal level. And do we have additional slides?
I'm sorry, Chairwoman Gallego, members of TPC. We do have a couple extra slides too, if we wanted to walk through some of the assumptions. We've talked a little bit about several of them already today. As you know, as included in your large agenda packet for today was outlining of some of these assumptions, including an assumptions matrix that compares Proposition 400 policy, so how we do business now, to how we're proposing moving forward. In a lot of cases, it's consistent and similar. In other cases, we're taking lessons learned and recommending a few differences. So we certainly can present kind of the last few slides that we have, Chairwoman. If you're interested, it outlines some of these assumptions for potential discussion. I think from our perspective, MAG particularly is interested in hearing from TPC at this point how we can move this forward. I appreciate Chairwoman's identification kind of some consensus points right now, but from our perspective, we're in the narrowing down of decisions to be made, and so perhaps identifying or at least walking through some of these assumptions. I think there's a lot of consensus, it sounds like, on several of these elements, but perhaps we can show some of them and see if there are things that we can move on from and codify, if you will, and identify to the degree that some TPC members have already indicated for future conversation, perhaps at our next Transportation Policy Committee meeting, Chairwoman, that we can dive deeper into them if that is the deference of the committee.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have, I think, accomplished a lot today. So we will, in my book, call this a successful meeting. Mayor Wires.
One of the questions that I heard asked 2 or 3 different times was about polling. Would it be possible to get some additional polling done before our next TPC meeting so we could make that decision, whether it's 20 years or 25 years? Because I think that's really probably our number one thing, that we're going to have to decide on. Is that possible?
Chairwoman Gallego, Mayor Wires, we will do our best to turn around polling. We can do a task order quickly. 10 days to our next TPC meeting is a tremendously short amount of time to get a statistically valid sample in the field. It's harder and harder, as you know, to acquire folks to take up and pick up their phone or get onto an online survey, but we will work with our consultants, see if we can turn around a poll as quickly as possible.
All right, and Madam Chairman, if I might, to me, that's what I need to know, really before I can make a decision. I don't want to waste a lot of people's time and effort and find out that there's no will from the public if they rebuke 25 years. But if they sound like they're going to accept it, it sounds like there's a majority of the people here that would probably accept it. Would like to know for sure.
Madam Chairman, Mayor Wires, members of TPC, perhaps we can do some flash polling on our website, some of our public involvement tools. Maybe we can do some, it won't be statistically valid, but which is important to understand. But we'll also we'll talk to our survey people and see if we can get something done to do a quick phone poll or something. Anyway, it may not be the greatest, maybe a single question, but we'll see what we can do.
We'll go to Chairman Sellers and then Councilwoman Binsbacher.
Okay, so just so that I understand what Mayor Wires was saying, you're suggesting that we should not say that we have consensus around 25-year half cent at this point. We need more information.
I agree. To me, that's what it sort of sounds like.
No, that makes sense. But we had a strong majority that was comfortable at 30 years.
Chairwoman Gallego, members of the Transportation Policy Committee, of things I wish I can get my brain to remember is the page in the report right now of where our 30% is. If you give me some time, I could probably pull it up and tell you what the 30% mark was relative to the 20 or the perpetual. So 30-year, what did I say? Oh, 30%, yeah. Low and sleep. So I can pull that information up here as quickly as possible to give that information to you right now.
Thank you. Councilwoman Binsbacher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to seek a little clarity here. So in Eric's comments to regarding circulators, it sounded as though there was still going to be an opportunity to discuss that and make a decision on that. And then Audra's comments are the time is now to determine. So if in fact that's the case, then I want to request that circulators be included and eligible for funding.
Madam Chairwoman, Mayor or Councilwoman Binsbacher, we are prepared. We can be prepared to provide some reflections on that at your next TPC meeting and what that looks like.
Okay, so then it isn't final, and we'll have an opportunity in future meetings to make that decision.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Daniels?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just get some parameters around that particular topic? Because when we say circulator, it very much does sound local. So I think what I would need in order to feel comfortable with that type of language is some definitions on circulators, maybe what they are today versus what they, in addition to what they could be in the future. I know we've seen a lot of different technologies, and that those could be considered circulators as well. And who knows what the future holds, especially 25 years from now. In addition, I think I'd want at least some context of what it does to the entire regional system in context. So if you have a circulator in Peoria, what is that doing to relieve, an additional traffic burden or other types of congestion that may occur in the entire regional system, because we do think of circulators as being so local. I just want to make sure we put it in the context if we're going to have that conversation.
Yep.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Let's go to Commissioner Barry and then Councilwoman Binsbacher.
Thank you. In the polling that you did you look at the congestion on certain freeways? Because I hear a lot of many complaints about the congestion in the morning and in the afternoon. I-10 is maybe one of the bigger problems.
Chairwoman Gallego, Mr. Barry, we did ask generally about priorities, reflections of the current transportation system, and then reflections for where investment priorities should be placed. Reflections on congestion certainly were expressed, not necessarily at specific locations. We didn't go through an exercise of identifying specific locations, only what our participants in the poll would offer. And I would say that there's a recognition and acknowledgement that we should continue to endeavor to address congestion, most certainly within our region, but there's a mix and a variety of ways for which our respondents indicated should be priority solutions, and that included certainly important freeway investments, but also a multimodal portfolio.
Councilwoman Binsbacher. I'm sorry.
I think we have about 30 miles of I-10 going right through the heart of, if we can't solve that problem, I don't think we're going to have it could blow up the whole program.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the TPC. So, I think back to one of Audra's earlier points, with this region, with as fast as we're growing, we're at the time now where we're trying to manage congestion, right? And so we acknowledge that we need to put forth projects. And so what you see as part of the scenarios, both scenarios, significant improvements on I-10. So actually the project that we highlighted earlier, I-10 from the tunnel to the split, certainly addresses some of the issues on the east side of the Papago Tunnel. Looking on the west side, largely the relief will come in the form of State Route 30. And so we have done significant analysis there. Really that central link provides the biggest bang for the buck in terms of congestion relief to I-10, but certainly full build out of State Route 30 helps. And then another aspect that we are putting forward in these scenarios is trying to optimize the I-10 corridor to better manage that congestion. So it's a multifaceted approach, but we certainly can say that we do have significant investment we're putting forward towards that issue.
We can talk offline on it.
Thank you. Did we get Commissioner or Councilwoman Binsbacher?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Quickly, I just wanted to acknowledge the points that Ms. Daniels made and, appreciate all great points and just great discussion overall. So I really appreciate it. But I just also want to say that it's easy to define the eligibility, what that looks like. And we're happy to do that. And how in my mind, and as far as circulators in Peoria, we see them as connecting to the super grid and being beneficial to the overall regional system. And we can have that discussion later. I think what I really wanted to make sure happens today is just to understand that there's that opportunity still exists.
Perfect. And in case you cannot see all of us, there was some head nodding from MAG staff on the opportunity still existing. And I think we should not go to any additional slides today, but at our next meeting, we will discuss maybe a little bit revisiting of the existing polling we have and micro and circulators. And we will go to Commissioner Daniels, who
I think you already had it, so it's probably more of a staff response, but
Chairwoman Gallego, members of Transportation Policy Committee, Ms. Daniels and I were able to pull up the polling report to provide late breaking news on the support for duration of tax. The question that we asked was, for what period of time would you be supportive of a tax? The options we gave were 20 years, 30 years, or perpetual. And 65% of respondents indicated support for the 20-year option, 4% for the 30-year, and then 22% for a permanent. So in general, there's a lot of support, I think, in general, but you'll see there's a bit of difference between a 20-year term, a lot of comfort there, certainly, but then also from a permanent perspective, 22% of individuals being supportive of an ongoing tax as well.
There was just one more component, though, of that question, and that was, it was only asked of those who already expressed support for an extension and or an increase. And if that's the case, that percentage is not necessarily 66% of our total voters. Instead, it's going to be a little lower than that, which could get us into that margin of error where we could be challenged. So just putting that poll into context, that's why I think this polling is so important and why we need to be able to replicate it.
All right. Item number 4 was on the agenda for information and discussion only. We've already gotten into a little bit of item number 5, which is request for memberships for an item on our next agenda. We will continue our discussion of the regional plan with a discussion of data-driven decisions and what will be included. Are there any additional requests for members? Are there any comments or announcements from the membership? Business is now concluded. The meeting is adjourned. For those of you attending in person, please don't forget to get your parking ticket validated.